Hi and welcome back to ITEP Online. I'm here with Jim Scrivener today. Hi Jim, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Can you tell us a bit about what you're doing today in Glasgow or for ITEFL?
The main thing I'm doing at this conference is I'm taking part in a symposium. I'm not doing my own personal presentation. I'm joining in the symposium under the banner of XDF. That's known as New Oriental Language Schools in England.
And when is the symposium? It's
on
Wednesday?
It's on Wednesday, yes.
Wednesday afternoon,
on Wednesday
right?
afternoon, yes.
Yeah.
So New Oriental is the largest language teaching operation in China. As far as I know, it's the largest language teaching operation in the world. I've been very lucky that I've been doing some work with them over the last few years. And one of the things I did was last summer with Lindsay Warwick and Matthew Clark, we did a tour where we visited a number of language schools, XDF language schools around China, and we were just dropping into lessons and observing lessons. So we saw more than 50 teachers teaching. These weren't model or prepared lessons or sort of special things put on for us. These were normal, everyday language lessons. So I had a real insight into what language teaching was like inside the organisation. And that's what's led to this symposium where I'm basically going to say some of the things that I saw, and some of the things that I saw were, from my perspective, my Western, background, my cultural assumptions. These were things that were very odd for me in terms of language teaching. I saw teachers who essentially were speaking throughout a lesson in Chinese, speaking non-stop through the lesson, not giving students a chance to practice, not giving students a chance to use English at all themselves.
So these were English language lessons?
These were English language lessons that, for example, are conducted entirely in Chinese.
Wow.
With no student participation. So we thought it would be interesting in a symposium to actually put up my Western observations against a response from the Chinese perspective. So I'm going to raise these points, like the teacher just talked all the time. And Jocelyn, my colleague from XDF, is then going to explain, first of all, historically, why this is the case, why Chinese education is like this, and then to give some reasons why it still continues like this, and why it may be the best way to operate in China. So it's not an argument, but it's very interesting, I hope, that we have two very contrasting views of what education, how learning happens best. And we're going to basically set these up against each other. Whether we reach a conclusion, I don't know. But some of the questions we're asking are things like, is the CELTA, or is communicative language teaching in general, an appropriate thing to try and introduce into the Chinese context? Or is it just completely inappropriate?
And how do you think this is also relevant to other teachers from different countries? Because a lot of our viewers are from many different countries. Yeah. How would it be interesting for them to tune in and watch what you're doing?
I suspect it's very interesting for a lot of people in the fact that many cultures have this problem where there's this thing out there called CLT and there's all the variations and task-based learning and all these contemporary approaches that don't somehow seem to fit into their local environment. And there's a clash between what they think the world expects to happen in an English language classroom and what actually the reality is. And in China, it's a very, very strong clash between two very contrasting educational cultures, the Western ELT methodology and the Chinese one. And I think a lot of our teacher audience will find echoes maybe in their own situation, that they've found that maybe some of the solutions that come from CLT just simply don't apply or don't work. Now I'm taking up quite a strong argumentative point of view in what I'm saying. I'm saying that for me, I can't understand the Chinese side. I can't understand how it can be acceptable to have lessons where students don't talk. But then Jocelyn is going to come along and say that there is a reason for it, and that this is probably the best way to go forward in China. So I think a lot of people this will ring bells for them in their own situation, in other contexts, in other countries.
And in your needs analysis, because essentially what you did was a needs analysis of China, and what did you assess the impact? I mean, how do these lessons impact the English language learning of the Chinese students?
This is one of the things that we differ on, because I mean, Jocelyn would say that the students learn exactly what they want to learn, they learn efficiently, they learn fast, they learn effectively. And from my perspective, that wasn't what I saw. I saw I'm having trouble believing how largely passive students who are simply learning definitions of words are getting value for money and getting efficient learning. Anyway, it seems to me that there must be a way forward, and the way forward is not one way and it's not the other way, but there's a third way forward that we have to discover, and that the first step forward may be finding ways to help teachers to lecture better. If that's the approach that is expected, then can we find ways to work on that rather than maybe trying to make a huge risky step into full-scale task-based learning or whatever in the classroom.
And what are your next plans with China? Are you planning to go back to do
I
more?
don't have immediate plans to go back. I'm going to be working on some materials for the Chinese schools and for the Chinese teacher education processes. I've actually done some training courses already with I've done some trainer training programs with them. So we're sort of trickling down some possible alternative ideas and different ways of working.
Well, it sounds really interesting what you're doing in China.
It's fascinating, yes.
And you're also working on some other publications as well as your work with China?
I'm working with Richmond publishers on a new course book series, which is called Personal Best, and that will be coming out probably in about a year or so. The series will start coming out. The most distinctive feature of that probably is that we've taken I think it's a relatively bold step of separating out the language from the skills work. In most contemporary course books, we've become used to the familiar model where the language is rolled into the skills work. So first of all, the students study a listening text or a reading text, and then out of that is extracted the language that they're going to focus on. There's a lot of obvious arguments why that's a useful, interesting way to work. It feels more authentic. But I think it's led to a lot of confusion for students in some places where they can't understand the skills work, they don't understand the text, and therefore they don't understand the grammar work or the vocabulary that comes out of that. So we've taken the decision to separate those out completely. So when you study grammar, you study grammar. When you study vocabulary, you study vocabulary. And that means that you have the wonderful situation where the listening work and the reading work and the writing work and the speaking work is studied in its own right. You're doing the listening work for the sake of getting better at listening, or the reading work for the sake of getting better at reading. And I'm quite excited about that. I think that's an interesting thing to try and do. It also has a little bit of, I don't know if you've come across demand high, it has a little bit of demand highness about it, and the fact that we're suggesting ways to teachers that they can get more out of exercises. For example, using this idea of 3 times practice. So if they want to, they can just do an exercise once. But if they chose that if they found they had more time, they could actually do an exercise 3 times in slightly different ways to actually go a little bit deeper and make sure the students went away with something from the exercise.
No, it sounds really interesting. So you seem to be quite busy at the moment.
I'm sort of partially retired, I think, but I still seem to be finding things that excite me.
Definitely.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, and tune in later for some more interviews on ITAP or online.